So thank you all for joining us. My name is Ty Dinnan, and I'm the president of the Charlotte Grange. At the Grange, we work to honor our agrarian roots and help build a resilient future for all. The best way to learn more about the Grange is to visit our website at charlottegrange.org. Part of our mission is to promote civic engagement, civil dialogue, and social interaction. And Candidates Night checks all those boxes and is an annual tradition that the Grange is very happy to have made possible for many years. A little bit of housekeeping, please put your phones on silent or mute. If you are a candidate and you're in the audience and you want to participate, you're welcome to come up front. We do often focus on select board candidates and contested races. And so all of the select board candidates who are on the ballot this year are the folks who are at the front right now. And for folks that are in the audience who are on the ballot, thank you for volunteering. I also want to take some time to thank the Senior Center for hosting us this year. This is our first live event since COVID. So it's really nice to have Candidates Night back in person. And I would like to thank the Charlotte Library for bringing their technology over so that it can be a hybrid event. So we have some folks tuning in online from home and some folks here. And that's sort of complicated. And we really appreciate Susanna and the tech services of the Charlotte Library for that.
You have on Zoom? 21 right now. Just curious.
Right.
Yeah, 20 more people are on Zoom right now. So the recording of this event will be available on the Grange's website later. So if you know folks who weren't able to come and you think that they should hear what happened, you're welcome to point them in that direction. And now I would like to introduce this year's moderator, Nina Reagan. Nina served as a member of the Select Board's Inclusivity Working Group and has been an active volunteer in Vermont for several years, including on 3 nonprofit boards. Nina retired from the federal government as a senior executive, having served in the intelligence community for 32 years, and she's lived in Charlotte since 2019. Thank you so much for moderating tonight. Thank you all very much for coming and reading.
I would like to thank our candidates. So we've got Lee Crone, JD Earlehy, Kelly Devine. Thank you so much for being here. It's really, really important that our town gets to know you better. So this is a great opportunity. Thank you. My responsibility is to structure the evening. And I deeply appreciate how engaged our town is. Including so many active volunteers who make our town run smoothly. We're aiming to end by 8 o'clock tonight. And we're going to ask the candidates to speak for no more than 3 minutes per question.
And see this if you get to
No problem.
Ty has very graciously agreed to help us keep on track. And when I say I'm grateful for an engaged community, I mean that we've received a lot of great questions from the community already. So the format for this is that I'll start with 3 questions that Ty has already shared with the candidates ahead of time, and then I'll transition to the questions that we've received from the community. And as time permits, we'll take even more questions from y'all and also on Zoom. So Ty has a basket back there with index cards that folks can write questions on. And then in Zoom, we can take questions via chat.
The goal of that is that we can bring them all together. There's a lot of repeated questions already from the ones we've received. So we want to be as organized as we can so that we can cover as many topics as we can. So yeah, there's index cards in the back and you can write your question on it and put it. I'll leave the blank index cards out of the basket. You can put written index cards in the basket and I will gather them in about a half an hour. All right, are we ready to go?
Okay, first question. Why are you running for office and what do you hope to contribute?
Well, I'll go first, if that's all right. Lee Crone, I have had a long career in municipal government in many different roles. And very simply, my hope is to help create a calm, collaborative approach to working with the board, with the volunteer committees, and with the community. I'd like to help our volunteer boards feel more respected and more appreciated for the wonderful work they all do. And I'd like to help the select board create more effective, efficient methods of governance so that they have more time and bandwidth to focus on big picture policy issues and not so much on multiple conversations about what are realistically pretty small issues. Thanks.
Thanks, Lee.
Hello, I'm JD Herlihy. And first I'd like to thank the Grange, the library, the senior center, and really the other candidates and all of you that are here and online for participating in this. I'm running for the select board because I truly care about our community and believe I can make a positive impact. I want to create an environment where everyone's voice is heard with respect and civility, and where the board actively listens to all perspectives. I'm committed to understanding the issues fully by gathering input from all angles and then making informed decisions that drive for the best possible outcomes for our town. And my goal is to help our town move forward efficiently and effectively with a focus on what's best for all of us.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Devine. I've lived in Charlotte for about 20 years, and I got first involved in town government, I think in 2020, where I was on the planning commission. Some of you may know that I work pretty extensively in municipal government in Burlington, Vermont, and have given back to that community quite a lot. Sometimes I've done things that have been very successful. Other times I didn't exactly get what I want, but that's sort of the nature of politics, I think. I was on the planning commission for a couple of years and decided I wanted to move up to the select board because you know, I could be involved in other things like budgets as well as land use regulation. The decision to run again wasn't an easy one for me, if I'm being honest, because it's a lot of work. It is a volunteer, pretty much. I mean, we get $1,650 a year, but it's pretty much a volunteer effort. And it's not always easy to be sitting up at that table and try to balance all of the interests of everybody that's in the room. One thing that was really important to me that I didn't get to accomplish in my first 2 years was that I really wanted to see the town effectively capitally budget for all of the assets. We're sitting here in this beautiful building we all paid for it, right? And we're all responsible for it. And I really want to see the town put money aside every year for that day when you need a repair. We had a situation in this building last year where something above the ceiling, I think a tank broke and water was coming in. You need to be prepared for that rainy day. And so I really would like to see the town's budget not only be prepared for the immediate needs of the year, but also move forward with some capital planning. That's an important thing for me. I've worked on 3 town budgets so far, because when I first got elected, the town budget failed. So I think I have it in me to work on 1 or 2 more, but I think that we need to get some of our costs in balance. I've had a good conversation recently with Fire and Rescue about the regionalization question. I really would encourage all of our members of our community to explore how that can be something that will reduce the burden on all of the individual towns involved. We know that life in Vermont is getting less affordable by the day. If anyone see the article in New York Times?
Yeah.
We made the Sunday New York Times and it wasn't good. They said, you know, it's the housing boom of the pandemic. A lot of people came here during the pandemic has ended. We have a housing crisis, but also we're an aging state. And I think every single town and every single official needs to be thinking about how to do what's right for all the different interests of the town, and also to think forward and see where you can make some cuts, but also see things that are underappreciated. When I asked the Recreation Commission to come forward with their capital needs, I found out that our bathhouse was built in 1980 and it's not handicapped accessible. That's something that I want to fix, and I'm strongly supporting the measure on the town meeting day to put some money aside for that, because they're looking at getting grants. So There's a bunch of stuff that I still could do on behalf of the townspeople and hope that I'll get the support to do it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Second question, could you please share some thoughts on areas that are working well for the select board and any areas for change and or improvement?
You want to go first this time and I will next time?
Sounds like a plan. So I would say the select board's done a commendable job on keeping the town budget low and minimizing the impact of taxes on Charlotters, even in these challenging times that we've had with the school budget issues that are happening at the state level. As someone who is a regular attendee to select board meetings and who served for 4 years on the zoning board and then the DRB, from what I've witnessed and experienced, as well as what I hear from a lot of other volunteers in town, is that I think we can improve on how we delegate the responsibilities to those boards, as well as to the town staff. And then we can also do a better job at trusting those boards to do their work and to deliver on what's asked of them.
Can I get away with a ditto? One thing that I think I've been working with, and we had a change in town administrator. When I first came onto the board, I wanted to start using consent agendas and to streamline those agendas. I absolutely agree with what I've heard, that the board meetings could run better. And I sometimes get frustrated sitting there because I'm like, we need to move the discussion along. At the same time, we have to have an open process where people are involved, and those things need to be balanced. I think probably could be balanced better. Our chair is not running for re-election again, so there'll be a new leadership coming into the select board, and it'll be important for that person to understand what those things are. I think the select board has done a good job with the budgets. I think we've started using consent agendas. We ended early last night. We are working actively on changing our purchasing policies so the town administrator can approve those contracts. Last night, we voted to not put the mowing contract out to bid again. I'm sorry, the brush hogging contract, because we don't even get any other bids every year. There's no reason that we have a trusted contractor who we really like. And those are the kinds of things you really need to look at to streamline things. I'm a big fan of taking the curb cuts and making that an administrative approval. We usually just listen to what Junior says anyway. I also have begun to talk to the individual committees. They need budgets that they can work with and authority over them. I don't like to see these committees have to come before the select board and ask for money periodically when they need to get stuff done. We need to think about it at the beginning of the year, have them come forward with a budget request, approve it to the best of our ability, and then give them some parameters to go do it. I think far too much financial stuff comes before the select board. I think far too much decision-making stuff comes before the select board, and the select board needs to have some more time to think broadly on things like, can we regionalize our fire services in a way that works well for the town? How are we going to take care of all of our assets, facilities? What do the people really want to improve the town? And so those things I think are really important. And so those are some of the things that I'm thinking about going forward. I also, in my growth as an individual, I want to work on my own patience.
A lot of good suggestions were made by both of the candidates. Certainly, Kelly mentioned a transition in the chair. I'd like to thank Jim Faulkner for his years of service.
Here.
Really hard job. Worked closely with chairs with many boards for many years, and I know what that takes. Staff level and the chair level to really help create an efficient process. There was some discussion last night about enhancing efficiency, and I hope that we will continue to move in that direction. Again, delegate more to the staff we've hired and hopefully trust. That's why they're there. And let the board really focus on some big picture policy issues. I too am a big fan of long-range capital budgeting as well as reserve funds, which we all probably have at some point at home to make sure we're prepared when things do happen, and then try to stay ahead of the curve so that we don't wait till things break before we have to fix them. I think also that I'd like to see the board have a little clearer guideline on it, managing public comment at meetings. It's a tricky balance because they are open meetings and they should be open meetings and people should have an opportunity to speak, but we had some reasonable limits. They don't have to be absolute, but try to give everyone a chance to speak, but it doesn't have to be lengthy, or it doesn't have to be repetitive. My former town moderator always used to say at the beginning of town meetings, it's important that everything be said, but it's not important that everyone has to say.
Great. Thank you all very much. Okay, third question. What do you believe are the most important priorities for the select board in the coming year?
First one is hope that everyone stays healthy. We had a terrible loss last year with Louise, and that was really sad and hard. Can you tell me the question again?
What do you believe are the most important priorities for the select board in the coming year?
The most important priorities. I think they've been said by all three candidates in this last answers we had here. I mean, I agree with you, Lee, about, getting public forum to be meaningful, but also managed. Having attended a lot of Burlington City Council meetings, that's how they do it there. And sometimes their public forum goes 2 hours. So I think that I agree there. I think the select board's priorities, I really want to see us move forward on that bathhouse renovation as fast as we can. I think we need to help and encourage all of our, both the staff and as well as the people that are running committees to continue to explore grant opportunities because we can do more for the town. We have absolutely got to get Spear Street fixed and we've got to do it quick. We don't want any of that money to disappear. My God, that is I think if people watched it, that's over $1 million project. Right now we are on track, but we're gonna have to support Junior, who's in the room here with us tonight, as well as Nate to do the amount of work that is required. There's a lot of paperwork and it all has to be filled out correctly. That's an absolute priority. I think I've been working with Nate on formalizing how people apply for positions on volunteer boards and appointed positions. We need to do better at that. We need to give people notice. People need to know when they're coming forward. I mean, I have arrived at too many select board meetings to see someone's name on there that I haven't seen before. And I don't think that's the best for the people that want to volunteer. So there's a lot that can be done. There's only so much that can be done in the time allotted. And I think we need to continue to keep our budgets, continue the same format that we have done. Prices of things are going up. This year, our health insurance went up over 22% in the town. And you're all feeling that too. I know you are, because yours did too, very likely. And so we need to work really hard to figure out ways to manage the budget without hurting all the things that we love so much about this town. If people don't know me, I moved here to create the co-housing community off of Green Bush Road, the one south of here. And I was the biggest advocate in that group of the town trail coming through that property and helped working on that early agreement. We have so many amazing amenities, but if we, as Lee said, don't do reserve funds and capital planning, they're threatened. So that's going to be a really important part of the budget, I think, going forward.
I think one of the most important things the board can focus on is more communication with its volunteer committees. And when it comes to budgeting, and I understand perfectly well, I've had 35 years of budget preparation, the importance of the dollars and the cents. But at the same time, haven't heard much conversation over the years about the values we seek to achieve as a community. Because the budget isn't just an abstract piece on its own, it's a tool to achieve goals and values. And I'd like to see us start the budget process with a discussion of what's really important in the company and how do we budget for that, rather than just saying everybody should come in with a flat budget because we need to keep it. And one more thing along those lines.
as I mentioned, in the first question, why I'm running for office, I intend to prioritize making the board and our meetings more approachable, for everyone in town. And then I'd also like to see the select board prioritize what they're working on, and keep the focus on those priorities. I also remarked on how the select board has done a commendable job in managing the town budget and keeping it low. However, as we all know, the town component is only a very small fraction of our taxes, of our property taxes, and to continue keeping spending flat year over year without starting to have serious impacts on our services, I think is unrealistic. So I think we need to spend considerable amount of time and effort listening to you, our townspeople, and understanding what are your priorities, and then and putting our efforts into these efforts and services.
Great, thank you all. Lee, did you want to come back?
I'll pass, thank you.
Okay.
I'm wondering if we can slide down this way a little bit so we can hear Lee a little bit better.
Okay.
Maybe you can slide that as far over that way as you can. Thank you.
Okay, so that ends the three questions that were given to the candidates ahead of time. Now, I do with community questions. Hopefully not very surprised. As Ty mentioned, we received a lot of community questions, and what we've tried to do is bundle the questions, the ones that, you know, the themes that were recurring, those are the questions we're going to be asking. So the first one is, do you support the charter to restore townwide vote on land use regulations? Why or why not?
Well, good question. I did write an op-ed piece about that a month or so back. And my goal in that particular piece was not to take a position on it, but just to try to illuminate potential pros and cons of each approach. Personally, I would rather see a third approach where the select board would retain the authority, but potentially adopt a policy that if there were minor changes that needed to occur or changes to conform with state law that just have to happen, that maybe they could retain the authority to approve those just because it's an efficient process. It doesn't close the townspeople out of that conversation. And that policy might then also say that anything that's making a major change in how land use is regulated, they could still choose to send that to a town vote. And to me, that third option, I'm a Libra, so I often seek balance. And to me, that might be a practical approach, because if everything goes to the voters, there are many times when there's a whole bunch of minor changes that would just improve the simplicity of the system. It's not undermining it, it's not trying to take the community out of the conversation, but sometimes those things just need to happen. It's also important to realize there is a petition process in state statute. So hypothetically, if the select board retained the authority and the citizens didn't like what the select board did, you can petition that to a town vote. So that option always exists no matter what. But personally, I'd rather see that sort of middle ground policy approach. Thanks.
Thanks, Lee.
So I'm not a big fan of microphones. I'm going to agree with Lee on the practical approach. It's my understanding that if it does pass in the town vote on the Australian ballot, it's not highly likely that it will come out of the legislature and be approved. Just because of it's a longer story in nature of it. So independent of that, I would agree that a policy with the select board is a practical approach, and in seeking balance between and really, from what I've spoken to and what I've heard from a lot of the people that are involved in the petition, the concern is about the substantive changes to the land use regulations and making sure that those go to townwide vote. And I would support having the select board have that type of policy. And I think that also allows some more flexibility too. And without getting into the weeds of the LURs too much, the way we've been passing them, at least since I've been in town, is a lot of the different changes get bundled into kind of two different groups, and then we're voting on all of the changes at once. And that could have some of the substantive changes that are, I would say, more debated, bundled with ones that are substantive, but would generally be supported by the town. And I think if we move to an approach, the more practical approach, we can actually tease those apart a little bit better. So people actually, when they're voting on something, they can vote more independently on the changes that actually are going to have a more meaningful impact.
JD.
So I want to start out by saying that growth is probably one of the biggest questions that we have to face. And especially in a beautiful rural town like we have, that's changing. Everything around us is changing. I stood in shock at the planning commission meeting when I saw the CCRPC report with little boxes everywhere. I didn't know what the heck went wrong there, but something certainly went wrong. Well, I will say that generally I am in favor of some additional growth in the village centers and our more dense parts of our community. I do think we have to absolutely preserve the rural nature of our community. That's why we all came here and what we love about it. We have to keep that in balance. Being on the planning commission is where we're doing that work right now. I was on the planning commission for 2.5 years, and what I saw and what I think both the other candidates reflected on is sometimes a change is a small administrative change. Since we switched to a DRB 2 years ago, but by maybe about 1.5 years now, maybe my memory's not serving me correctly, or it's a little over 2. 3, all right, Charlotte, I was gonna count on Charlotte to straighten me out. We've had to go in and still change things where it still says planning commission, it's the authority of the DRB. That's an example of what we call administrative fixes or changes. Right now, the way things are working, those are moving right to the select board, getting fixed, and then they go on the shelf and that's it. Probably something none of you are gonna lose any sleep over. When it comes to deciding about the future of the town, when it comes to any major zoning changes, the select board did a straw poll when this came up, when the petitioners came to us to ask our opinion, and everyone at that table agreed that we were in support of bringing these major changes to the voters. I want to remind people, you have an opportunity to weigh in at the planning commission. You will have an opportunity to weigh in at the select board as well. I love the idea, Lee, of coming up with a policy that codifies that so that the citizens know what to expect, because I won't always be sitting on the select board chair, maybe I won't be in a month, and other people are gonna come and go, so it's good to codify what your intentions are, and I think that's really important. I think that I personally will not be voting in favor of that petition. I could say I support it, because I do know that it won't go through the legislature. As some of you know, in my day job, I work with Montpelier a lot, so I do know how things work up there. I've seen a couple of Burlington ballot items fail because the state legislature does not want to impact statewide policy to the favor of one town, and that's what this would represent. That being said, some citizens have spoken, several hundred people have signed the petition, so we need to figure out something else that works for everyone. I will say to you that I, as a select board member currently, and if re-elected, are committed to bringing those substantial votes to the citizens.
Thank you very much, Kelly, all of you. Okay, next question. How do you approach balancing care for the environment with efforts to pursue town development and infrastructure? Do you support the build out of municipal water and sewer in the East and or West Village?
I'm worried that I didn't hear you on Zoom. Do you mind?
Oh,
and then my first
sure.
phone for that.
Okay.
Now that you moved this,
All right. How do you approach balancing care for the environment with efforts to pursue town development and infrastructure? And specifically, do you support the build out of municipal water and sewer in the East and or West Village? It's a lot there.
So I think, how do we balance the development with conservation? Well, I think we have to find the balance. I think we need to And one of the key factors in that and the way that we decide on that as a town is the town plan. As Kelly already stated, or well, she didn't exactly quote it, but the town plan currently states that we want to have higher density in the town villages. But that's to preserve the rural nature of, the character of our rural parts of town. And that sometimes those two statements are split, but actually the way it's written in the town plan, it's one where the density in the villages is to help protect and conserve the rural areas. And I think we need improvements in the town plan and in our LURs to make that more possible and enforce that some more, while also protecting the landowners' rights for people. So the second half of the question is whether or not I support build out of municipal town sewer and water. The town does already have some municipal sewer here in the West Village. Currently, I don't believe it's maxed out. I would not support increasing that at this time, or doing municipal water.
In both the west and the east?
Yeah, sorry, and so I wouldn't support it in either village.
Sometimes taking care of the environment means having those services. I grew up in a seaside town in Massachusetts, and everyone had a septic system in their 3,000 square foot lot in their backyard. You know, so in that case, sewer was essential to protect the environment. I think you need to think about those both things. One of the things that concerns me, when I was on the planning commission and we were working on the community health center, we heard from a lot of residents here in the West Village about water problems. I have some friends that used to live here that talked about issues with their wells. And so, you know, I happen to have a deep well because my house was built in 2016, but other people have older wells. So I think I wouldn't put anything off the table, nor would I put anything on the table without a lot of understanding the costs, understanding the impact, and understanding what goal we're trying to meet with any of those changes. I will say that we have started to look at the sewer system in the West Village. Right now, I have to tell you all, it is a burden on taxpayers because we don't have enough entities hooked up to it. I think when Mary figured out what the bill was gonna be for each of those entities for a hookup, and it was like $13,000 a year, which really could not move forward, obviously. So, you know, we have the pizza place over here, Stone's Throw, we have these municipal buildings, but we don't really have many other commercial hooking up and using it. So we're going to do these systems and put them in place. There has to be a plan for development to support them. Until we get to that spot, I really don't feel like I can take anything on or off the table until I know more, until I hear from residents about what we really want. I think when we think about development in Charlotte, we have to be thinking proactively. One of my concerns, I watch housing policy as part of my day job, so I have that advantage. And I watch it in Montpelier. I've been involved in Montpelier housing policy, been involved in housing policy in Vermont. And if people followed Act 181 last year and the Homes Act that went forward, Montpelier is putting pressure on towns to develop. So either you're proactive and you get ahead of that, you have a plan, or somebody who doesn't know the uniqueness of your town and doesn't know what you need tells you what to do. That's in effect what we saw with the Homes Act when they said, no, land use regulations are no longer going to the voters, right? That was handed to us by the state. So I think as a community, as we work on our town plan rewrite, and as we think about who we want to be and where we want to go, we also have to be thinking, can't be in a place where we say, nope, we're not going to do anything because my concern is then we'll be told to do something that we don't want to do. In Massachusetts, where I'm from, they passed an act called 40B. And if you had a certain percentage of affordable housing in a development, you would be exempt from all zoning. And I have seen some of the worst projects in the world built under that regulation. So, you know, let's work together to figure out what we want to do, and let's make sure that we're acting in our own benefit before someone else tells us how to do it. Thanks.
Yeah, this is first part of this question is easier than the second part. Balancing things is really what I think Charlotte is trying to do already, although not somewhat imperfectly, but we have the two villages and then a lot of open space. and what some might call mandated sprawl, because one house per 5 acres means the proverbial too big to mow, too small to farm. Unless you have a cluster development like the co-housing or 10 Stones where I live, where there's 80 acres there, 16 homes, but they're clustered very nicely together in a big open space, ag land that's managed appropriately. But so every town faces this, how to balance these things, and yet at the same time, you read that 175-page town plan and it talks about wanting to attract young families and racial diversity and a thriving community and economic development. And how do you do those things if you can't build anything? As far as the question of supporting or not supporting municipal water and sewer, that's a much more complicated question because it relates to capital costs. What would it cost to build it in the first place? And what would it cost to maintain it? And often that long-term maintenance piece gets left out of the equation when we look for grants to build beautiful things, but we don't always think about what's the long-term obligation to that. So there'd be a lot to study before taking a position on whether municipal water and sewer is a good idea. But the practical reality is, if we would like to see any level of incremental growth in our villages, we may need to think long and hard about some form of community water and wastewater capacity, because that's the only way it can happen. Someone came to me the other day in Shelburne and said, I really like that infill development along Falls Road. Why can't you do that in Charlotte? Well, one reason is there's water and sewer, municipal water and sewer. So that makes it easy. It takes the whole issue of wells and septic issues off the table. The other part is the zoning allows for that kind of infill. It doesn't mean we're building skyscrapers or building massive developments, but infilling on vacant lots where there's already homes there at a scale that fits the community. Is that a good thing for Charlotte? We'll be having that conversation.
Thank you all, very thoughtful. Okay, the next one, broad question. What is your approach to budgeting for the town?
Just repeat it and then decide when.
Okay, I'm gonna repeat the question. What is your approach to budgeting for the town? You know, I didn't think when I ran last time, I didn't think I was gonna win personally. I was kind of surprised by that. To give Patrice a lot of credit, she was an amazing candidate, but also I didn't think the budget was gonna fail, so I sort of got thrown headlong into it. And I don't know in the 2 years, if my term is only 2 years, in the time that I served, I hadn't even been able to take a breath above water to really figure out my approach to the budget. I'm starting to just think about that now. Certainly, I think one of the things that I've been pushing for that I haven't been able to advance is having a plan to maintain these buildings and repair these buildings that we own and these other assets that are so important to us, the trails, the beach, you know, Whiskey Bay, and prepare for unforeseen things like the bridge that went out on Spear Street. Luckily, FEMA is covering that. So I think that's definitely going to be part of my approach to the budget. I think we also need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to generate revenue. And that's why I'm looking to talk to my fellow select board members about seeing whether we can get some grant writing resources to come into the town. I couldn't have been more pleased. Both trails and recreation came forward with grant ideas. Nate's working on a grant under the CCRPC 2026 work plan. There are resources out there for the senior center. I've started to talk to Lori about how we can help her get some grants. She doesn't have time to write a grant, I know that, but we need to start looking at those other resources because there's a lot here that we really value. So I think that's going to be an important thing for me is how do we bring more revenue in? If we don't grow the number of taxpayers, the increasing burden of running the town will fall on the same number of taxpayers. So we need to figure out together what that means. There are revenue sources, but it won't make a huge dent in the bottom line. There's the opportunity to regionalize fire and rescue, which I think can help a lot. What could we band with other towns on? But if we really decide that we're not going to ever do a project like Shelburne, which seems hard to imagine here, or if we're not going to add density in our village centers, then we have to remember that the number of houses here, if it doesn't change or expand, that means that the burden, because we know the cost of running the town is going to go up. You know, we have a lot of employees, that's something that you have to pay people more money, and health insurance goes up, that's, you want to keep people, you have to pay them well. That's a big part of running a town, but also the cost of everything is going up right now. So I hope that folks, will, really make their voices be heard in this town plan piece, and that more people will show up for the budgeting piece, or at least email. I totally agree, Lee, about the communication, and we worked on a newsletter that we started that I think is helpful, but let's work together to figure out how we make that balance. Thank you.
I'd say my approach would be twofold, both a top-up and a bottom-down approach. So bottom up and top down. I even wrote it wrong. So for the bottom up is where the committees, departments, and different entities in the town set their budgets based on what the needs are for the town, and the resources that they need to meet what the residents want, and the services that we need to have to keep the town running. The top down is the select board looking at what the tax burden is going to be, what the impact on the residents is going to be. And then that's when the negotiation happens in the middle, where, you know, typically we want to try to maintain a minimum impact on our taxes, but we also want to be able to deliver on those services. And I think Lee said more eloquently than I have about, you know, I forget your exact words, but you know, how we need to really understand what the town wants. And, you know, sometimes we have to pay a little bit to get what we want. You know, things like the senior center is a great resource for the town, the library, the beach. You know, everyone that uses them really enjoys them. So we want to make sure that those are supported, and we want to make sure other things like that in town are getting that support. But at the same time, we have to, we can't just spend as much money as we want, and all our taxes get doubled.
As I mentioned earlier, if I could wave my magic wand, budget process again would start with a values-based approach. What are the values we hold dear? What is it we'd like to accomplish? Charlotte's town plan is like so many town plans. It's a potpourri of descriptions and goals and policies. There's probably hundreds of goals and policies and assignments of tasks. But there's no prioritization in that. And that's not intended to be a criticism of the planning commission. I've helped write many town plans. I know it's a challenge. But I'd like to see the select board have a conversation with our committees about what might be the top 3 projects we'd like to accomplish this year. We can't do 1,000 of them. We can't do 100 of them. Maybe we can do 3 of them. And maybe we take a several year visionary approach to say, okay, we can get these 3 things done this year. What would be the 3 things in this next year? And start to create some budgets that not just look at this year, but maybe start to look out a couple of years. Or maybe there's a year where we say we can't do anything new. It's time to repair things that we already have or did, so that we keep those things moving forward. So that it's not just, again, I'm not making light of the dollars and cents, but the dollars and cents have an intention and what they're looking to accomplish in any given year. And that's how I would hope to structure that process.
All right, next question. The town, as you know, is in the process of negotiating a union contract with town staff. What negotiating experience do you have, and what do you believe is important for the staff and the town to know?
Tricky terrain for sure. I've negotiated a number of conservation easements personally over the years, and it's as much a conversation about psychology as law or property value. I've successfully negotiated 3 union contracts in the town of Shelburne. Those are not easy processes. And I think what's important to know is that during that process, you're bound to confidentiality. So people might really want to know what's going on in those conversations, but we all sign an agreement that we're not going to play that out in the press. We're not going to talk about the specifics or the process while it's ongoing. But it is definitely a delicate balance of what might be asked for by a group of employees or their union representative and what the town feels it can reasonably offer. And sometimes, again, you need to take a long-term approach to that. When I last negotiated a police union contract, they were always 3-year contracts. And for various reasons, it took 1.5 years to actually negotiate that contract. So I always try to think, is there some creative opportunity here? And so I can speak about it because that's long settled. I asked, can we do a 5-year contract? Because otherwise we got to start again next month. And that was a win-win for both sides. They didn't want to go through that again. They got clarity on what the 5-year plan looked like in terms of income or benefits. And the town saved a lot of money by not having to spend its entire time negotiating those things because they're complicated, they involve legal advice. It's exhausting. So here we are, we're in the middle of it. Somebody's been helping to negotiate that. It's a tricky process. And I hope that it comes out okay for all parties.
Thank you.
The question was about our negotiation experience.
Yes, and based on that, what do you think is important for the staff in the town today?
So for negotiation experience, I've worked in the life sciences, in commercial businesses for the last 15 or so years. And in that, I've negotiated several multi-million-dollar contracts between different companies for services. And while not exactly a union negotiation, these contracts are between two companies that are going to work together and have to continue to work together for years going ahead. And so in order to do that, you have to work together to find those win-wins, to find the common ground and situations that are or terms that are going to allow both groups to benefit from the contract. Negotiations cannot be one-sided. We cannot, you can't just win to win. You need to make sure that your partner is going to be able to be as excited about the contract when you're done as you are. And I think that's analogous to contracting, especially in a small town like Charlotte, where a good portion of the staff and the people in the unions are the people that we need to live next to and where they are our neighbors. And then they're also going to be providing the services that we go in when we go to the library, the senior center, town hall. They're going to be the people that are working with us rather than for us.
So I have a lot of experience with contracts in the private sector. When we built the co-housing community down here, I was the president of the organization, the lien owners rep, and negotiated every contract that impacted that build out of 26 house sites, and the total contracting value was like $8 million, $8 million negotiated with Comcast, with Munson, with the septic people. We had a fun time with the Wildwood West people. We tried to get them to let us bring some services in over there, but they weren't having it. That's how that one ended. But and I do contracts all the time at my job. I have been involved in 2 union contract negotiations in Burlington relative to a parking reform project that I was a private citizen but assigned to the committee, and we were trying to get the parking attendants' job descriptions to change in a way that would allow them to not just sit in the booth and collect money, but also collect credit cards and then do some cleanup around the garages. And I saw pretty quickly how important it is that things are very clear when you are negotiating with the union. I am one of the 2 select board members that is on the negotiating team with the union. We have just begun our work. I can say that it is a challenging task but I also feel up to it, and because of that, I don't think that, it would be appropriate for me to answer the last question, unfortunately. I will say that generally in negotiations, your best outcome is an outcome where no one gets everything and no one gets nothing. And I do hope, and I hope I bring with me the hope that this will end in a way that is best for everyone involved. But I can't really answer the question, sorry, in too much more detail.
That's great. Thank you, Kelly. All right. Next question. How will you delegate and prioritize issues to ensure the most important matters of the town are addressed? The select board has had liaisons in place for each of the board committees in town. What do you see as the most important function that these liaisons provide?
So I think I already somewhat said some of this in my earlier statements. So I believe we do need to trust our boards, and so we need to trust that the boards and committees are going to help set the priorities for the town, that they are fellow residents and volunteers in town, and they're bringing forward, it's the planning commission, what the priorities are for the planning commission between town plan and land use regulations, conservation commission, what is important for conservation, the energy committee, et cetera. And so I would like to allow them to set those I would like to see the select board let those committees set those priorities and follow them and then support them. One of the key ways of doing that support, I think, is through the liaisons. So I know all of the committees have them. They might even, at least some of them, have more than one liaison. I also have heard from people in different committees that aren't sure who their liaison is and have very little or no contact with their liaison. Going to meetings, especially the select board meetings that are budget meetings, I feel sometimes there's there's little support for the committees when they come in. So I would like to see the liaisons be better at communicating between the board and the committees, helping them prepare for things like the budget meeting, making sure that they have the budget. It's in simple things like set up in the right format for the select board to review to make it more efficient. And then I think to some extent, the liaisons should also be champions for those committees on the select board. That doesn't mean they need to agree with everything the committee is doing, but making sure that they're ready, prepared to present their ideas, those priorities that I mentioned earlier, to the select board. I think that answers it.
So it's a very interesting thought-provoking question to me about what's important, how do you make sure that the most important matters get addressed. And as I was just sitting here reflecting on the little under 2 years that I've served in this role, we have been responding to a lot of very immediate crises types of things. We had budget failure initially. We had, so then we had to go immediately to our next budget. We had very serious storm damage last July. That was certainly a crisis. One thing that I have learned over my time on the select board is that it can be challenging to pull yourself out of that immediate, to look at those longer term priorities. I do absolutely support the idea that the select board and the new incoming chair will work with the select board to make meetings more efficient, to move some of the decision making off the select board table where it's totally fine being, and give us more opportunity to have the discussion about what matters most. I think that is a place where we really could make improvement. I think that I happen to be the liaison to the planning commission, which is kind of a slightly different role, and I was on the planning commission more, probably talk to the chair of that commission every week, if not every other week. and to get updated and help with things that they're trying to move forward. And I have particular interest in that area, so it's relatively easy for me. I do think that we should have a conversation about how liaisons can serve better, only because it's time, and select board is a pretty demanding thing, and how do we make sure all those needs get met? I've already started, I think the committees actually have some pretty good priorities, and we haven't been doing a great job in empowering them to deliver them. And so I think we need to do better at that, and so I started to move at the end of this budget year with some debate at the table of putting more money into the pockets of those organizations with the ability to use that money. So right now, our purchasing policy absolutely has to be rewritten. The numbers that are in there do not reflect the cost of things today. In my opinion, if we give $10,000 to the Trails Committee, which probably, hopefully is helpful, but, they need more to expand it and to repair it. We had a lot of damage there during the storm too. That we will also set up the purchasing policy so they can go and take action on that. They shouldn't have to keep coming back and getting on the agenda and, having to justify their case. I don't think that that's a valuable use of people's times. And then sometimes when they get stuck in a difficult position because there's something really immediate, then they get pushed onto the agenda and people haven't had time to think about it. It's just not the best outcome. So I think we can definitely look at those things, but absolutely empower those committees to move forward with their priority, mainly by giving them money and authority to use it.
Thank you, Kelly.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't answer yet.
Another interesting two-part question. With regard to select board liaison to committees, I've got a couple of thoughts on that. One is, I think a select board liaison can probably be helpful in terms of offering some strategic guidance to the boards, or asking them what they would like to see as well from the select board liaison. I'm not sure if that question's been asked, you would know better. I'd like to see the liaison help those boards work through challenges and help them celebrate their accomplishments in public. As far as setting priorities, I'd like to see the select board and the town administrator hold a retreat at the beginning of the new cycle and to really set some goals for the year, so they don't either come across as the emergencies we have to deal with, or are only based on requests made to be put on the agenda, but the board itself has some strategic thought process about, here's how the year flows, here are the things we'd like to accomplish. We know we have a budget cycle to work through, we know we have other things we have to do, but I'd like to see that be a very conscious, proactive approach. And then part of that conversation can be, what can we delegate? What feels comfortable under our statutes or our rules to delegate? What does the town administrator feel that that person is willing to take on? Because I think we could make better use of our professional staff. So again, the board can focus on those big picture issues. But I think a retreat, I know it has to be a public meeting when you gather a quorum. I've been through a number of those. Some people come, some people realize that's probably going to be pretty boring. They're going to talk pretty much among themselves, and we'll find out what they did later. But it's a public meeting, I know that, but I think that would be a great way to start the new year.
How are y'all doing? Come on.
Oh, good, thank you.
So we have about 25 minutes left.
Okay.
I have a couple more questions from the community.
Great.
I don't know if we have any more from the room or from Zoom. No, okay. So we're getting there. All right, this one's about housing. Housing is a big concern in Charlotte. What is your opinion about the impact of short-term rentals on housing availability in Charlotte? And do you think some kind of regulation should be considered as part of a strategy to increase housing in Charlotte?
So I built one of the most densely developed developments in the town, and I think that it has worked well. I think there are 2 permanently affordable units in there. One of the things I think that I see now that surprises me is how much the cost of those individual units has come up, because the idea that they would be relatively affordable housing in Charlotte. I'm not really seeing that. So that must mean that there's just not a lot else available in the market. you know, our children and our children's children are the ones that are going to really suffer if we don't get this housing affordability crisis under control. That doesn't mean that it falls necessarily on this town. It's a wider community question that needs to be answered. I think, as I said before, if Charlotte can think about this proactively and do it, get ahead of it, then it won't necessarily be told what to do by the state. And I happen to agree with Lee about the 5 acres. You can't mow it, and you can't farm it. I think we should think about that. That's the existing zoning right now, and what could we do more? Right now, we have the planned unit development where if you get a large tract, you can cluster houses and get more density. So that's an option, but we have some real questions to answer about that, and I think we need to sort of figure it out together. I think it's important to remember that the absolute limiter on any housing development in this town is water and sewer. It's the absolute limiter. We all know how much it costs to put a private septic or water system in your own property and then maintain it, especially if anything goes wrong. And right now, most people have to undertake that expense to have a home here. And so, you know, it's going to be a challenge. Now, the 2 co-housing communities have community septic and water. The one co-housing down here is actually rated as a public water system. It has to meet the same conditions that the Heinsberg town water system has to meet. So there's the reality of how something like that plays out. So we have to really figure out that water and sewer piece if we want to meet some of those things that are in the town plan about attracting families and adding more housing affordability. That being said, I don't know if that's the absolute right answer for the town, and that we should talk about it together. Now, when I was on the planning commission, I worked on the short-term rental regulation. I rent my house out occasionally to help pay my taxes, and I'm a single mom putting a kid through college. And it helps me make ends meet and stay here. So it's really important for me to be able to do that. I also, when I was on the planning commission and then later on the select board, supported us absolutely starting with a registry. We don't even know how many units we have out there. And if we don't know what we have, we can't figure out what we need to do about it. A lot of our short-term rentals, honestly, are out on Thompson's Point, and those are mainly seasonal properties. So I really am very strongly supportive of starting with the registry, making people come into town hall and register their short-term rental so that we know what's out there, and then we can figure out if we need to make any changes and add some policies to better regulate that. Thank you.
Yeah, housing. It's a tough issue. It's exacerbated now. It's been an issue for many, many years throughout the state of Vermont. And it's a multidimensional problem. It's not just about short-term rentals. If you've priced lumber or land or roofing anytime in the last 5 or 10 or 20 years, it's unbelievable what it costs. It's why the so-called missing middle or affordable housing projects require tens of millions of dollars of tax credits and grant funding and outside sources to try to pull it off. I think the project in Shelburne is like a $90 million project. So probably none of us could afford to build our homes today by any stretch. Do short-term rentals have some marginal effect on that? I believe that they do. Registry might be a place to start. Some towns stop with that, and then so you know what you have, but you're not really doing anything about it. The challenge seems to be typically more what I'll call the party house. Somebody who doesn't live there, they rent the house out on a regular basis, and they have 20 people there for a wedding party, and it gets raucous and it disrupts the neighborhood. And it's a real problem. And I don't know what you do about that, because the problem is the behavior, not the fact that it's a short-term rental. Some communities have suggested that we will only allow a short-term rental if the property owner lives on premise as their primary home. The theory, at least, is that at least there's some level of oversight about that behavior. So that might be something to consider. On the other hand, there are folks, as Kelly mentioned, who find it an important part of their income stream so they can stay in their home, or elderly folks who rent part of their home out. there's a wonderful program called Home Share, which is very different than accessory dwelling. It's a longer term approach to renting in someone's home, but it's a multifaceted problem, and much of it is just driven by the simple costs of land and infrastructure and lumber. And if you're a builder and you're gonna make a 5 or 10% profit margin, you might as well build something that's big and beautiful and make a good profit. And there's no harm in that. I don't say that to be judgmental in any way. But it's almost impossible to build truly reasonably priced housing these days. It's just an unfortunate fact, and I wish I had a happier tale about that.
So I think this is a maybe three-part question in there, but so start with the short-term rental. I do actually, we have an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit in our house that's currently rented as a short-term rental. When we purchased the house, actually both our mothers had been recently widowed, and one of the attractions of the house we bought was to have an accessory apartment should they ever need to come and live with us. And it was, for a while, it was a long-term rental. We converted it to a short-term rental when that tenant moved out, because we needed the flexibility for if our mothers do need to use the apartment, and when they want to come up and visit with us and visit their grandchildren. If there's a long-term tenant in there, you can't just ask them to leave. And no, that's true. And so, well, you can ask them, they don't have to leave them. So that's one of the reasons why we chose to do the short-term rental, was to have that flexibility. So our mothers can come and stay for a week or so at a time. And then should they ever really need it, they can come and stay with us. Another fact with it too, though, we experienced, we thought we'd get a lot of people coming on vacation in the summers and in the winters. What it's been, 90+% of the people that have come and stayed at the house have been people that have been coming to visit other family members in Charlotte or Wake Robin. That's been literally 90% of the people that have come. I think for the first year, everything was weddings and funerals. And they weren't weddings that they were having big raucous parties that they were just coming in to be guests of the wedding. So, and with no inns or hotels in town, motels in town, really, there needs to be some level, I think, of short-term rentals to help accommodate those people. So the affordable housing question, and I think there's a lot of complexity to make affordable housing, not just here in Charlotte, but in Vermont. I think also with that, as Lee already mentioned, what we really need in town, and what most people really are looking for when they say that they think we need more affordable housing, is that there's the missing middle income housing. So housing, not necessarily affordable housing, has to meet HUD standards. I won't get into the technicalities of it, but it's very hard to get those projects funded now. And the scale of those projects are quite large. And if you know, in Shelburne, by Namaste on Route 7, the Vermont Housing Trust is doing a huge development there. That's the kind of scale projects that need to be done in current day to do affordable housing. Co-housing, where I also lived for a while when I first moved to Charlotte, there are 2 units that the Vermont Housing Trust supported when they built it. They don't do that type of project anymore, where they'll just do a couple of units within a larger complex. We actually, when we sold our house there, contacted them to see if we could have moved that house into it, and they had no interest in it 3 or 4 years ago. And so then Kelly brought up too the point about both co-housing and 10 Stones and how they have community water and sewer. And I want to just make that's a distinction from the municipal water that was discussed earlier. And I think we can support communities or higher density developments in town to help build more missing middle income housing, to help balance that development with conservation that's also been discussed tonight. But they can do it through their own community water systems. We don't need to do it as a town, which brings in those long-term costs, both for maintenance and also the unencumbered cost of additional employees to support them.
Thank you all. Last question from the community. The select board has frequently gone into executive sessions to discuss issues. How can there be adequate transparency when this happens? And how might you address this issue?
So I think transparency is a key thing that we need to work on with the select board. When I started with the zoning board, and then also we did it with the DRB, we started to do open deliberations for all of our deliberations. Prior to that, the zoning board and the planning commission, when they were doing subdivision review, used to always do their deliberations as closed. And we as a committee, and both those boards decided to do open deliberations to bring that transparency. And allow the community members to understand how we got to our decisions. They might not necessarily agree with what we did, but at least they know how we got there and did it. I would agree that there's been overuse of executive sessions by the select board. And I would like to see the select board limit them to where they're only absolutely necessary because of very sensitive information being discussed.
Next.
Before it.
So executive session is codified in state law and it's specifically intended to either protect the confidentiality of an individual that's involved in a situation regarding the town or other information that would be considered putting the town at a competitive disadvantage. We probably, if I had to look back at it, have had a larger share of executive sessions in my time on the select board. This was my, first experience with it, but I do think that those executive sessions have been used when they are necessary. We try to keep them short and we return to the table and we report out on any action taken. We have had several issues that have come before the town that are relative to the people that either work there or serve on boards, and that you would actually put some of those individuals, you would compromise them and share information about them that shouldn't be in a public forum, if you didn't do that in executive session. I never go into executive session lightly. It's not my opinion that the select board is using that as some means to hide things from the town, and I feel it's unfortunate if that's the perception that's out there. But I do have to say that it is an important tool for a body, and we all vote whether we're gonna go into executive session when we go in. Having been in those executive sessions, I can say that I haven't found one yet where I'm sitting there saying, why aren't we discussing this in open meeting? That being said, I do think that it's important that we let people know what we're doing. We always have to report the decision out in the public part of the meeting. Natalie Kaner, who's a fellow select board member, started a community newsletter where she does a weekly sort of summary of what is on the agenda. The agendas are published publicly in advance. The meetings are over Zoom. If I were to continue on the select board, I would use the same level of caution when we go into executive session and really hope that we're not facing as many challenging issues as we have in the past couple of years that I think necessitated that decision.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, executive session is certainly an important tool in the toolbox, but I agree that it needs to be used wisely and only when necessary. And perhaps the perception or reality might be lessened if there were a little more explanation about the reason. I know that the rationale is always stated, and it's a statement from state law, we're going in for this reason, but that doesn't really always explain what's really going on here. Not that you can reveal names or negotiations, but maybe a bit more explanation about why it's thought to be necessary and what the purpose is. And of course, any decisions made have to be made in open session after the executive session anyway. It's important sometimes, as Kelly said, sometimes you just have to do it, but I think it needs to be used wisely. And if I may just retreat back to the housing question, one small incremental possibility to help increase the supply of affordable housing would be to work collaboratively with Habitat for Humanity. And maybe at least 1 or 2 homes every few years could be built that would be more affordable, and there's a shared equity component there, so it remains affordable to future owners. I actually helped facilitate an entire Habitat neighborhood, which is the first of its kind. Usually like the one on Falls Road in Shelburne, it's 1 duplex or 1 home at a time, and the prospective owner has to contribute time and energy to actually build it. And hopefully a lot of the materials get donated, but maybe that's a very small incremental way to help 1 step at a time. Thanks, Terry. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to give each of you the opportunity to make a closing statement you'd like to make, or is there a question that you wished we had asked? So you're done if you want to be done, or you can say a little bit more.
Well, I won't be long. Some people ask me, why are you doing this? Are you nuts?
Some people.
For me, I didn't know if Jim was gonna run again. I did reach out to him in advance, as I did with Kelly, just out of respect to let him know that I was likely to run. I thought they deserved to hear it from me personally, but I didn't know if Jim was gonna run. I didn't relish the idea of running against someone. Grateful for his service. Here we are. I'm running because I think I have a lot of experience, background, analytical ability that I think I can be helpful to the board, helpful to the community, and that's the sole purpose. I stayed in local government my entire life, where a lot of my colleagues from school went on to state and federal level, because as challenging as it is to be so approachable, to me, local community is where it's at. My heart's always been about community and building trust and hoping that people believe that we're in it for the best we can for the community. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee.
So, we've already discussed our whys and why we did it, and a lot of great questions from the community. During this process, I've reached out, met with a lot of members of a lot of the different committees and boards. And I want to thank them for their time and the information they've given me. It's really helped me to start to understand some of the needs that the people that are the volunteers in our town want. And I'm looking forward to doing that with the community as a whole and hearing from all the residents in town of what you're looking for, what you want from the select board, because I think the select board is here for you. And to help support what you want. And in closing, I'd just like to again thank the Grange for organizing this, for everyone that's attending both here in person and online, and everybody that's worked to put this together.
Thank you, JD.
Yeah, I also want to thank the Grange for putting this together. Last time we did it over Zoom, and I like this better. And for all of you that came out, it was a little snowy out there. You know, it's interesting, the stuff that Grange has done over the past couple of years has been really inspirational. It really have pulled the community together, and I think that's an important thing for us all to think about, whether you're in public service in an elected office or an appointed officer on a board, that you really have an opportunity to serve an important role to bring the community together. The first 2 years for me on the select board has been a learning process about how to be an elected official. I've been working for nearly 20 years in public policy, in municipal government, and housing policy. But I was always the person that could show up at the meetings and give people a hard time. That was the role that I played for all that time. And I got to sit on the other side of the table and understand how hot that seat can get, how hot my own head can get. And I've learned a lot in those last couple of years. I've also, I think, tried to advance some things that went well, others that maybe didn't. And I think there's an opportunity for me to bring more of the experience that I have over the last 2 years and my experience outside of the select board to help improve things for the town. As I said, I've invested 2 years in learning how to do this job. You as members of the town have put up with me learning that over the last 2 years, and I'd like to give a little bit more back if I can. I want to focus on capital planning. I think that's important. I have a unique ability to access both state and regional government to bring those resources to the town to help us solve problems when we need to. I think the regionalization of the fire and rescue was an important conversation, and I was thrilled to meet with John Snow and say that they were excited about that. I was thrilled to see the new chief camp come in. He was somebody that I knew and had experience with in Burlington. I worked directly with Burlington Fire and Police, so do have a good understanding of how both budgets work and how municipal services work. And if I'm lucky enough to get reelected, I will stay very focused on some specific goals. And I will absolutely be working on, we have an amazing town administrator. I think that's probably one of the things that I'm proudest of is I've fought very hard to have Nate Bareham at the table and in the interview process. And I think he's worked out amazingly. He's ready to go. He's ready to do more for our town. And this new select board has to give him the ability to do that. Have to give him more authority over what we do as a town, and he's working on amazing processes. He's got a committee handbook going. We have a new application thing. I think that if I were lucky enough to be reelected, I think we need to really empower him. And while we're empowering him, we also have to empower all those volunteers to be able to do what they want to do, give them money to do it, because they're going to do great things for the town, and that stuff does not have to come before the governing body necessarily. I also, if I'm lucky enough to get reelected, I'm gonna continue to support our, road commissioner. If he's lucky enough to get reelected, no one's crazy enough to run against him. And, I wanna it's just been amazing learning from him how he keeps this all going. And, I'm sleeping in bed and I hear the plows go by because I live right on Fair Street. And I'm like, oh, there he is. But what we experienced with the flooding was really scary, I think, for a lot of us. And we saw you step right up to the plate without hesitation, and that's an amazing thing. I will continue to support the people that are serving the town. I will do the best that I can for both the employees and the town as I work through the union negotiations. And I'll be focused on streamlining the select board agendas, getting things done, but also Lee, because I think we're pretty sure you're gonna win this one. Work with you on that public forum process, because I think it's really important to have I think we can actually improve how people feel heard if we do some of those steps, and we really need to hear from the people in the town. And a retreat sounds pretty good to me too. I think that, one thing that's hard, especially as a newly elected member, is you don't even really know what these other people at the table think, and you don't get to ask them, So I know that the Burlington City Council did that, and they got a huge amount of benefit from it, so that's a fantastic idea. Thank you very much for hearing me out tonight, and if anyone wants to contact me, I'm always happy to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
I would like to thank you so much for your deep and abiding commitment to the town as reflected in your thoughtful and candid responses. Thanks for listening to our questions, really answering them so well. So thank you, all three of you. I would like to echo the thanks for the Grange, the library, and the senior center, and all the folks that behind the scenes put this together. I wasn't one of them, I just showed up. I appreciate everyone coming out. Our community is only as good as the people who are committed to practice and act on their sense of engaged citizenry. This forum has allowed us to share ideas and thoughts and experience, and allowed us to become more informed as we make a decision at the polls. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Todd. Thank you very much.
I don't have much more to say, but yeah, I would like to echo what Nina said and appreciating everyone who's come out tonight and the folks that participated on Zoom. And really appreciate Susanna here for supporting a hybrid event, which is complicated. Thank you to the select board candidates who answered so many detailed questions so thoroughly. And I do want to share that on meeting day, the gathering in person is going to be on Saturday, March 1st at 9 a.m. at Charlotte Central School. The election, the ballots are going to be available from 7 to 7 on what is called Town Meeting Day, which is March 4th.
Tuesday, March 4th.
Tuesday, March 4th at the town hall. And you can vote early if you would like to by going to the town hall and getting a ballot. So it's sort of confusing this year. And last Tuesday, we did a intro to town government or town government 101, where a lot of that stuff got covered in addition to what all the different staff at the town hall do and who to go to ask different questions, how to raise a question at town meeting. All of that is recorded and it's available on the Charlotte Grange website, and it was just under an hour. So it's a really great watch if you want to have a review of what's going on and feel a little bit more prepared before you show up at town meeting day in person this year. So I hope to see you all there. Thank you all for participating tonight and continue to get involved, please.
Can I mention one other thing?
Yeah.
So yes, please come to town meeting day, and I think it's important if folks don't know that there actually are 2 articles being presented at town meeting day in person where you will vote on whether to go fully to Australian ballot. So I know a lot of people are passionate about that topic, so that's going to be also decided at the in-person town meeting.
Also, a recording of tonight will be available on our website and on the Grange website tomorrow or the next day. And the Town Government 101 is also available on the Charlotte Library website too. And the Grange.
Thank you all. Have a good night.